Okay, so today, chapter 9, lesson 2, we'll talk about the religions of ancient India. So, first, we'll start with Hinduism. So, Hinduism was developed from the Aryans, remember, that came in, and their faith, there was no founder or holy book. Their ideas were memorized by the Brahmin priests and spoken out loud, and then later they were eventually written down in Sanskrit. There's the Vedas, they're called. And over time, that religion started blending in with the other ideas of people that were there in India, and that's eventually what becomes Hinduism. Okay. And so the main idea is that every living thing, it has a soul, and it's part of Brahman, the universal spirit that's called. Okay. And the idea is that, when you die, your soul will leave your body and join Brahman. So there's a good explanation in the book about, like, think of like a lump of salt. When you throw it into the water, the lump is gone, but the salt is mixed in with the water, and the water, like, now tastes salty, right? So you've kind of joined together and made kind of something new. So that's kind of the idea. And the ancient texts that write all this down are called the Upanishads. Okay, now this is hard for people to understand, so they did tend to make deities that they like to worship, statues and temples and ceremonies and things. So there's three main ones: Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. And over time, people started to think of those not as really as totally separate gods, but as different parts of Brahman. Okay. All right. So what are the beliefs of Hinduism? Well, the biggest thing is the idea of reincarnation. Okay. And this makes sense why now, if you know this, why Indians accept the caste system, right? Because they think that your soul, when you die, you actually are reborn into another body. And that's called reincarnation. And they think that, if you have lived a good life, then you'll go up in the caste system. And if you don't, then you can go down, and you can even go down into like animals. And so you're gonna be reborn over and over and over again, until you're trying to strive for that ultimate peace, that perfection in moksha. Okay, so moksha isn't like a place like heaven; it's more like an idea, right? And they think that, like I said, that how you act in your life will determine if you're born up or not, right? And so that's called your karma. And so if you have good karma, you'll go up, right? And you can get that good karma by doing your dharma. And your dharma is like your personal duty. It's different for everyone depending on your place in society. Like if you're a leader, right? Obviously, being a good leader is your job, and but there's everyone's role, even as like a good family member, right? If you're a good mother, if you're a good farmer, whatever it is, like doing what you're supposed to be doing is your dharma. Okay. And one of the other things is that so that's why, like, everyone kind of accepts the caste system, and why they think that people are below them are worse, right? Because they kind of like feel like they deserve where they're at in the caste system. Okay. All life is considered sacred, so even animals have a soul, and they are supposed to be treated with kindness and respect. All right. So that is one of the major religions, but the another one that rose in this same area is Buddhism. So Siddhartha Gautama was a prince, and he was kept very sheltered, and he really didn't know what it was like out there for common people. And one day he convinces his father, the king, to let him go out and like experience the people, right? If he's going to be a good king someday. So, and he ends up getting shocked at all the misery in the world. He had no idea how poor people were and how miserable they were. So he ends up really wanting to understand why this happens, and he becomes a monk, and says goodbye to his wife and son and his rich life, and he leaves, and he goes out in his yellow robe, and he dedicates his life to trying to find the answer. It is popular for Indians at this time. There were some in the 500s BC-ish that are feeling unhappy with how Hinduism is going and how Hinduism has so many ceremonies and everything, and they want a simpler spiritual faith. And so he goes off, like some others at this time, and they go off into nature, right, into the hills, and they are just trying to train their minds and bodies, and to think positively, and to search for wisdom. And so they're basically they're meditating, right? And so he gives up everything, and he works on this, and he ends up getting a following because he thinks he's kind of figured it out. And he then becomes known as the Buddha, the enlightened one, and he has followers, okay? And so the basis of his idea, what is the truth, this enlightenment, is that there's 4 noble truths. First of all, you have to accept that life is full of suffering, okay? And people suffer because they want worldly things, or like objects or wealth, and they're trying to satisfy themselves and make themselves happy by getting those things. And he says, really, that doesn't get you happy, and the way to end your suffering is to stop desiring those things. So really, like, change your mindset of what you want, right? And the only way to do that is to follow what he calls the Eightfold Path. Okay, so the Eightfold Path is often shown with this symbol on the right there of that wheel with the different spokes. So first of all, number 1, know and understand the 4 noble truths, right? Which we talked about before. Give up all worldly things and do no harm to others. Tell the truth, do not gossip, and do not speak badly of others. So it's not just not enough to not want objects, right? But you're trying to be a good person, right? And focus on being the best person you can be, which means not doing those things. Of course, also number 4 too, don't commit evil acts, killing, stealing, things like that. Do rewarding work, and they mean like dedicating yourself like for the good of other people, right? And for those around you, not just, trying to make money for yourself. Work for good and oppose evil. And make sure your mind keeps your senses under control. So that, right, I know that's kind of an interesting thing, but like trying to keep, be even keeled and not get yourself into drama, and practicing meditation will keep you focusing on the right path and avoiding all those extra things that are going to distract you. Okay. So this was a very popular idea that you could get to this perfect place of happiness called nirvana in Buddhism, right? You could get to this place more directly by doing these things. So instead of like in Hinduism, right, being reincarnated, and it's like a very long cycle of rebirth that would take you, especially if you're in a lower class, right? The untouchables or the other lower jati would feel like, they didn't have much of a chance, right? They're so low down, it's going to take them forever. Well, this is more direct, and they thought if they directly could act that way, they have a chance of enlightenment. So this would be attractive to those lower groups. So the Buddha teaches for about 40 years. And then, of course, he ends up dying, but the religion goes on. And now after his life is over, his followers do kind of separate into 2 different groups. It's still teaching the same basics, but the a lot of the differences on it, what do you think of Buddha? Theravada Buddhism teaches that Buddha was a teacher, a great teacher, but not a god. And this is a major religion in Sri Lanka, and you can see it also spread to Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, that area. Okay. Alternatively, Mahayana Buddhism thinks that Buddha was a god, and so that's a major difference. The other thing is they think that the Eightfold Path is really too difficult for most people. And if you looked at that was a lot to ask, right? So they say, oh, well, if you just worship Buddha and actually, try to follow these things, you'll go to heaven. And then in heaven, you'll be able to follow the Eightfold Path. And that's when you'll actually reach nirvana, okay? They also thought that there were certain enlightened people who wouldn't enter heaven, and they would stay on earth, and they'd go and help others on their path to nirvana. So those are Bodhisattvas, I think. Sattvas is right. And this version of Buddhism is popular in China and then Korea and Japan. Also, you will find it in Tibet. Tibet is an interesting place. Maybe you've heard that they have people called lamas. Now, notice the spelling. It's not like the animal llama with two L's. These in Tibet, the Buddhist leaders there's two main ones. The Dalai Lama, who leads the government, so you might have heard of him, or the Panchen Lama is the person who leads the religion. And both of those, though, are supposed to be, they consider them as reincarnations of the Buddha. So that's interesting. Okay, another religion is Jainism. So there are about 6 million followers, mostly in India, of Jainism. We don't know the exact origins, but we think, or we believe, that Mahavira was the person who was the religious leader who led. He lived around the same time as Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, and he also was from a royal wealthy family, but his parents died, and then he decided he was going to give up all his wealth and property and go out and same thing, beg for food and try to find the truth. And so he also gets followers. His ideas are very similar. Don't want worldly things. Actually, very strict poverty. Like I said, he would even beg for food. So Jains don't. They go from house to house asking other Jains for food. Basically, the people who have really dedicated themselves. By the way, I didn't say Jainism comes from his name. Mahavira doesn't sound like Jainism, but that's because he was known as the Jina, which is like the leader, right? The conqueror, it means. And so that's where Jainism comes from. One of the interesting ideas of Jainism is ahimsa. And ahimsa is something that is very popular in India. True ahimsa is practicing nonviolence towards all living things. So Jains, you will sometimes see people having a small broom with them, and that's because they gently sweep away any insects so they don't step on them. True Jains don't farm because they're afraid of plowing, the worms under. Or when I've seen a video, they take little handfuls of dirt and, if they want to plant something, and they do it all by hand to make sure they don't hurt anything. So that idea of ahimsa is influenced a lot of people in India. Mahatma Gandhi is probably the most famous example, and that's his picture there. That is later in life. He did wear normal clothes, and he was a lawyer and everything, and he became a leader actually in South Africa first. He's from India, but he went there to work and then got involved in these causes and trying to use nonviolent protests there first, and then he came back to India and helped lead against British rule of India because they wanted India to have its independence. And so I'm sure he had a lot of nonviolent protests. He was arrested many times for him and his followers sitting and praying and not dispersing though when they were asked to, right? So they were arrested, and he had sometimes he would fast, right, to draw attention for his cause. Anyway, so he was successful, and he was very popular, and he was preaching nonviolent protests. And so he's very influential. In fact, Dr. Martin Luther King was influenced in his ideas. And as you know, he also, Dr. King was very strict about, right, we're going to protest, but we're going to do it very peacefully. And that's why you can be heard.